Hey yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. This episode we're going to talk about what is going down this week on Smackdown and 205 Live. We have a couple tidbits from the wrestling world, the news and rumor section of the day, and we don't want you to forget this Saturday night, May 13th, 9 p.m. start time for our next live fan voting live Pro Wrestling Podcast event. So if you are a loyal listener who tunes in every episode, we look forward to getting your questions, comments, and concerns all on that episode, 9 p.m. Saturday night, May 13th. Also, don't forget our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ProWrestlingPodcast. If you want to be a contributor to our website and to our podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. We would make sure that we give you guys the opportunity to be featured in our comment section on our different podcast episodes on YouTube and all other media that we put out there. And we have other different levels. If you want to sponsor us even more, we have all the way up to you co-hosting a show with me live online. So by all means, if that's something you're interested in, we would love to have your support. Let's get going with today's news. WWE Hall of Famer Kevin Von Erich of the famous Von Erich family, who is obviously no longer a spring chicken, as the old saying would go. He's up there in age, and he hasn't wrestled, I want to say, since like the mid-90s, right around the time that his brother Kerry passed away. He hasn't wrestled in so long, and he is now making a return to the pro wrestling ring. He's going to come out of retirement, and for those who don't know a lot about the Von Erich family and their background, tragic story of a lot of his brothers. There was multiple brothers that all, for one reason or another, came to their early demises way too soon, and it really put a dark eye on Texas wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling, the outfit that his father Fritz Von Erich owned. And there has not been a lot of positivity for the Von Erich family in a very long time. Now, recently, he did have his niece, Kerry Von Erich's daughter, Lacey Von Erich, was a mainstay of TNA for a short period of time, but more of the focal point of his focus in the professional wrestling world now is his sons, Marshall and Ross. Marshall and Ross have kind of carried on the family name, and they are now active in the business on the independent scene. And what is going to happen for anybody who has never been overly exposed to World Class Championship Wrestling, one of the locations where they were extremely popular was in the Middle East, over in like Saudi Arabia, in Israel, in places like that, where it was a very different audience, but Fritz Von Erich was smart enough to see that that was a audience that he could tap into and really create an interesting product for those people. Well, you fast forward all these years, and there is going to be a match. It's going to take place on July 9th in Tel Aviv, and it's going to be called the Rage Super Show. There's going to be other people that you guys are familiar with: Matt Sydal, aka Evan Bourne, Marty Jannetty of the Rockers, Tatanka, another WWE stalwart. They'll all be there, as well as Kevin Von Erich coming out of retirement. He's going to team with his sons, Marshall and Ross, for one last match, which I find very interesting. But they actually had a comment. YNetNews.com did an interview with Kevin Von Erich about his return to the ring, and he had this to say. He said, "I've turned down New York, I've turned down Tokyo, and I'm not going to wrestle again. I love Israel, I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, and my sons are the same way, and this is the Holy Land." So I feel like he's doing this almost like a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in some way, and this is going to be the last time anybody gets to see him in a professional wrestling ring. And now, a lot of people, when they get to his age, you would think, they're not going to be able to move anymore or whatnot, but this guy, he has kept himself in phenomenal shape. He was in Texas for his youth, but now he's out in Hawaii. He's got a great property out there, and he keeps himself in great shape. And I'm looking forward to at least finding the match on YouTube or somewhere so I can get to see Kevin Von Erich wrestle one last time. If you have never seen him wrestle before, I highly encourage you to check that out. Going to get right into the Smackdown results from this week. It's an interesting week because they're overseas in Europe, and we get to get the results ahead of time. So I, like all of you, have not actually seen Smackdown this week, but I have the results. So I will give you the results, and then if I see anything interesting that I don't report on in this episode, I'll report on in the next episode. But typically the reporting is pretty accurate. My understanding is Randy Orton's going to start to show off for the first time since his loss at Payback. He's going to have a conversation about the World Championship situation, and he's going to be interrupted by Jinder Mahal, who will be facing him at Backlash for the World Championship. It's going to lead to Baron Corbin and Kevin Owens also interjecting themselves, and then, the fallout with AJ Styles and Sami Zayn coming out, leading to a 6-man main event for later in the show. The first match of the card, Natalya takes on Becky Lynch. Natalya's going to pick up the win there with a roll-up from behind. It's going to lead to the Backlash announcement that Becky Lynch is going to be teaming up with Charlotte and Naomi to take on Natalya, Carmella, and Tamina with James Ellsworth on the outside. I actually am very excited to see that match because if I was booking that, I understand you've got these three women who make up this triad of terror or whatever they're calling them. I don't even remember what they're calling them. But Becky Lynch is someone who I think would thrive if in this match they had her turn on Charlotte. Not because we need a fourth woman heel member of the stable, but because I want to see a one-on-one encounter with Becky Lynch and Charlotte on a actual show, and I think they could do really well. I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later. The problem I have is right now, if you look at the SmackDown women's division, Becky Lynch, Charlotte, Natalya, Carmella, the four of them are all really, in a lot of ways, being promoted higher than the women's champion Naomi. And I feel like this is kind of a slap in the face to someone who has worked for a very long time to secure her position on the roster, and she really deserves to have the spotlight on her as the women's champion. And instead, we're taking so much time to focus on these other women. Not that they're not equally deserving, but they're not the champion right now. If you want to focus on them, give them the title. Otherwise, I feel like you're kind of taken away from Naomi's moment in the spotlight. She deserves better than that. There's going to be a vignette from the Fashion Files. I'm loving these because I think we've gotten away. People didn't like for several years there the cartoonish appearance of professional wrestling, and it went all reality. That's what was the Attitude Era. That was the NWO era and things like that, and that was great for a time. But we're in a PG era now where you're trying to attract younger audiences, children, families. And if you're doing that, you kind of have to have a little more cartoonish things in there every once in a while. This, I think, is being done pretty well. We're not getting inundated with cartoonish baby characters, but we are getting an opportunity to see these two guys who have a lot more skill than they've been allowed to show on television in the past, getting some screen time and doing something that had some real value. I actually enjoy these vignettes. I think that WWE needs to look at doing more with this tag team. I think they're far better than they've been allowed to be, and I'm hoping they take the tag team championship from the Usos at the pay-per-view. That's my preference if I was booking this. Eric Rowan is going to shockingly get a surprise victory over Luke Harper. He has a brand new finishing hold, and my problem with this is not that Eric Rowan gets the win. I think Eric Rowan needs some wins to establish himself as a real player in the company. My issue is that Luke Harper already did that. Luke Harper was a botched battle royal fall away from being the number one contender to the World Heavyweight Championship. He was the guy running interference for Bray Wyatt for such a long period of time. He had a great feud with Randy Orton. So he's done all the things he needs to do to be strategically position himself to be a top draw, and instead he's now losing to Eric Rowan, who has been a glorified jobber for the last 2 years. So I don't have a problem with you trying to build up Eric Rowan. I have a problem with you doing that at the expense of Luke Harper. Luke Harper deserves better than that as well. I feel like I'm a broken record already between Luke Harper and Naomi. People that deserve to be promoted not being promoted, and those who have already had their opportunity just hogging up the spotlight. That takes me to the next line. Dolph Ziggler calling out Shinsuke Nakamura in an interview segment. Nakamura comes out. He wants a match on SmackDown, but Dolph Ziggler refuses. He wants a match at Backlash. Now, the reason I said what I said about these people who've had their moment, I am a huge fan of Dolph Ziggler. I need to establish that up front. I like Dolph. I like his character. I like his skill set. I think he's phenomenal. He's kind of like Shawn Michaels Jr. He's not as good as Shawn Michaels, but he's really, really solid in the ring, and their appearance and movesets are very similar. My issue is this. They have tried to get Dolph Ziggler over in a certain way, and it didn't work. He's held 2 World Championship runs, one for the matter of a day or so, one for a very short period of time before he got a concussion and had to end up losing the championship, and they've never put the belt back on him because there's always been somebody stronger, at least in the public's eye, on the roster. You can't fault WWE for putting the belt on the most popular people. You know, Dolph Ziggler, like I said, I think he's worldly talented. I think he's phenomenal. But he's had his moment. He's been in the company for several years now. He's not going any further than he already has, unless they pull some kind of swerve and suddenly make him world champion. So if you're not going to do that, I'd prefer to see Nakamura get this feud over with sooner than later, and move on. Move on to something of more substance. I understand why they're doing this. Ziggler's a name. He's established. He's somebody that you can put him in there with, and there's no concern over if you beat his character, you're going to harm any future booking, because he's already been beaten by everybody in the company at some point or other anyways. But I would prefer to see this feud end quickly. They keep doing the matches and after the show in the dark matches, and so people around the country are seeing the match already, and it's probably going to be very much similar to the same match you see at the pay-per-view at Backlash. So I would like to move on from Nakamura and Ziggler and move Nakamura into a more featured feud. Breezango is out there. They had their vignette earlier. Now they're out to take on the Ascension. Missed opportunity. That's what I think of every time I think of the Ascension. I understand when they first came out that they were not the Road Warriors, and people compared them to the Road Warriors, and the WWE quickly reacted to that and then moved them down to being essentially tag team jobbers. I get it, I understand it, but that's long since passed. People have acclimated themselves to the Ascension not being the Road Warriors. At this point, you have two talented wrestlers who carried your NXT Tag Team Championship division for a very long time, so clearly they can handle the pressure. What I'm not seeing is anybody give them a chance. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand Breezango just won the number one contendership, and I've been ranting and raving for the last couple episodes that we talk about this topic about wanting Breezango to win those championships, and I do. So don't put him in the ring with the Ascension. Put him in the ring with American Alpha, who you've obviously decided to bury. Put him in the ring with the Shining Stars, or whatever you want to call them now, the Colognes, who you obviously aren't pushing because you had both of those teams get beaten in the Beat the Clock challenge. Put him in there with one of those teams and have them lose. You're already destroying their characters to begin with. Don't destroy a character that you actually have an opportunity to push. And I think the Ascension have never really gotten a fair chance. I think they would be a nice, fresh feel to the tag team division in much the same way as Breezango is. And as just a side note, both of those tag teams will be in that 256-team tournament that we kick off on Saturday night, 9 p.m. Tune in through the Spreaker link. I got a couple messages from people who are popping onto YouTube. I do not broadcast live on YouTube. I'm not Mr. Computer Savvy. I am as basic comes. Spreaker, the service that I use to host my files, is where you can find the live broadcast. So www.spreaker.com, do the search for Pro Wrestling Podcast. It'll pop up. I will put a link to my podcast episode in the notes section of this episode so that you know where to go on Saturday night if you want to tune into us live. The final match at Smackdown, the main event, Jinder Mahal is going to score the pinfall victory over Randy Orton in the main event. He teamed with Baron Corbin and Kevin Owens to take on Sami Zayn, AJ Styles, and Randy Orton. From what I understand, decent match, SmackDown is becoming notorious for putting on these high-profile matches without giving away your pay-per-view matches. I need people to understand the difference, okay? So you go over to Raw, and you see Seth Rollins versus Samoa Joe. Why in the heck would somebody who does not have the network pay for a pay-per-view to see Seth Rollins and Samoa Joe when they've already seen it on free, live, weekly television? Why would somebody pay to see Finn Balor take on The Miz? Why would somebody pay to see Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose? We saw all those matches on Monday night. So how do you promote a pay-per-view with the same matchups? It's terrible booking. Now you go to SmackDown. Now look, yeah, Kevin Owens has a match coming up with AJ Styles. I get why they're in the main event. Jinder Mahal has a match with Randy Orton. I get that. I don't really understand what the whole involvement of Baron Corbin and Sami Zayn is. I know they want to push that feud, but they're not on the level with the others right now. But here's my thing. Those three different feuds are taking place at the same time, but they're not going to be featured as one match on the pay-per-view. So giving this six-man tag team match gives you a sample of what you have to look forward to if you buy the pay-per-view. It gives me a reason to tune in. It gives me a reason to pay attention to Backlash. And more important than any of that, and I don't know if people think about this often, is that by them doing this, by them promoting this six-man tag team match, you get to see AJ Styles in a ring with Baron Corbin. You get to see AJ Styles in a ring with Kevin Owens. You get to see AJ Styles in the ring with Jinder Mahal. And the same thing with every other combination. I threw out the AJ Styles ones because I'm a bigger fan of his than anybody else in the match. But the point is, you get to see a little sampling of all sorts of future feuds. If Jinder Mahal works out as a heel in the company, you're going to want to see him go against Sami Zayn. You're going to want to see him against AJ Styles at some point if he gets over. If not, you at least get the opportunity to see that and make that decision for yourself before they put it into a main program and spend all that money to promote a program that people don't want to see. This gives you an opportunity to see what it looks like. So I'm happy with the main event. I think SmackDown is significantly more innovative than Raw. I'm going to move on now to 205 Live. My understanding from the feedback from the reporters over in Europe are saying that most of the crowd cleaned out after SmackDown. There was a few people left for 205 Live, a decent enough number that I'm sure that WWE will be able to make it look good on television, but Certainly not the crowd that was there for SmackDown. In this episode of 205 Live, it starts off with Austin Aries and Jack Gallagher sharing a pint of beer in the ring together before they're interrupted by Neville. Typical banter, back and forth, arguing. At some point, I wish they would just hurry up and either end the feud with Aries and Neville, or give Neville a loss to Aries so Aries can take the title for a little while and then switch it back. Whatever you're going to do, get on with it. Because at this point, I feel like Aries is feuding with two different people. He's feuding with Neville and TJP, and that doesn't end well for anybody. And Jack Gallagher just keeps becoming the sacrificial lamb, losing every week to somebody different. You go on, the next section, I love this, Mustafa Ali over Tony Nese. I love the build of Mustafa Ali. I think he is somebody who can be a stalwart of the division for a long time to come. I hope he gets an opportunity to run with the title at some point, as soon as they get over with this Neville-Austin Aries thing. I wish they would move on from. Akira Tozawa again against Brian Kendrick. He defeats Brian Kendrick again. After the match, Kendrick attacks him again. Here's my problem. If he attacks him after the match, it means we still have more matches coming. We're tired of seeing Brian Kendrick and Akira Tozawa. Move on. WWE, if you have anyone who has accidentally tripped across this podcast, hear me when I say this. We're tired of the Brian Kendrick versus Akira Tozawa. We've had it going since February. It's May. Get over it. Move on. Give us something different. The Brian Kendrick is not a spring chicken anymore himself. He needs to get into whatever feuds you're going to give him and keep the momentum going. He's not going to be wrestling forever. And we haven't seen him have good feuds with people like Mustafa Ali, a Drew Gulak, a Noam Dar. Instead we've seen the Akira Tozawa thing for the better part of 2-3 months. Move on. And then to close out the show, there is a video vignette that plays about Cedric Alexander. He's coming back. He'll be returning soon, which can only be a boost for the 205 Live roster. I wouldn't mind seeing the Brian Kendrick feud with Cedric Alexander when he gets back. It's a nice way to transition him away from Tozawa. I'd like Tozawa to go feud with Neville for a while. I think they'd put on a great match. Please don't forget the Fro Wrestling Podcast special event, live fan voting special show coming up on this Saturday night, May 13th at 9 p.m. I will get you the link in the description below. Make sure you click on that. It'll take you into our Spreaker page where you can tune in. You can give us your live votes, your questions. We'd like to answer those questions. Last week we got some great questions from our listeners. I appreciate that. Don't forget to go to our Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Fro Wrestling Podcast, if you want to be a patron member of the Fro Wrestling Podcast team. And don't forget, we have that Saturday night special. We're going to be kicking off our 256 team tournament, which you guys requested. I was shocked to see that. Most of the time people get bored with this tournament thing by now, but you guys seem to really enjoy that singles tournament, so we're going to be doing that 256 team tag team tournament. And I had a suggestion that I somewhat enjoy, and if you are in agreement with this, by all means put it in the comment section on YouTube. Somebody had answered my question I had last episode. I said, what do we do with people who are in multiple tag teams? Shawn Michaels in the Rockers, Shawn Michaels in DX with Triple H, Shawn Michaels with Big Daddy Cool Diesel for a while holding the tag team titles. And the response that I got, and I actually got from several people, is that I should intentionally put the various tag teams that a wrestler performed under, put them against each other early in the tournament, so as to eliminate the various incarnations of one wrestler being in the tournament, and have only their best team prevail moving on into the later rounds. I actually really like that suggestion, so I will try to do that to the best of my ability as I bracket this out for you guys. So that's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next time. We'll run down the latest news and rumors in pro wrestling. Special thanks as always go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all the music and sound effects we used in today's show. Today's podcast was sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to www.thegamecrafter.com/sketchypeople to pick up your copy today. And to AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade game needs. Be sure to shoot over to our website at www.frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, go to www.tsjsports.com/WWE for the latest articles on the world of professional wrestling. Until next time, take care, everybody, and have a great evening.